It was a cool autumn evening in a small town in Texas, the kind of night where the streets were quiet except for the occasional passing car and the neon glow of the diner sign flickering against the dark sky. Michael, a single dad in his late 30s, sat at a corner booth with his 7-year-old daughter, Emma. Life hadn't been easy for him since his wife passed away 3 years earlier, but he had promised himself that Emma would never feel unloved or neglected. They shared small rituals, like coming to this diner every Friday night after school and work, for pancakes and hot chocolate. As Michael sipped his coffee, tired from a long week of construction work, he felt grateful just to see Emma smiling across the table, talking about her spelling test and the art project she wanted to finish for school. To anyone watching, they looked like a perfectly ordinary family just trying to enjoy a meal. But in the midst of that ordinary moment, something extraordinary was about to unfold. At another booth, not far from where Michael and Emma sat, a teenage girl sat rigidly across from a much older man. She couldn't have been older than 16. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen as if she had been crying, and she picked at her fries without eating. What caught Michael's attention wasn't just her silence, but the way her eyes kept darting toward the exit door, like it was the only lifeline she could see. There was no warmth between her and the man sitting opposite. His face was hard, his eyes sharp and controlling, and the way he leaned over the table felt suffocating. The girl's body language screamed discomfort, her shoulders hunched, her hands trembling, her lips pressed tight as though she was holding back words she couldn't dare say out loud. Michael shifted uneasily in his seat. He had no intention of intruding on strangers, but years of fatherhood had taught him to read unspoken signals, and what he saw in that girl's expression made his heart heavy. Something was deeply wrong. Emma noticed her dad staring, and in her innocent voice she asked, "Daddy, why is that girl so sad?" Michael hushed her gently, trying not to draw attention. He didn't have an answer he could give his daughter, but the truth gnawed at him. He thought about Emma. What if she were in that girl's shoes one day, terrified, alone, looking for someone to notice? The thought sent chills down his spine. He shifted his focus back to his meal, but his eyes kept returning to the girl. Each time she glanced at the door, it was like a silent cry for help. Michael's instincts told him she wasn't just uncomfortable, she was trapped. His pulse quickened as he debated with himself. Was he overthinking it? Was it really his place to get involved? But then he saw her clutch her napkin so tightly that her knuckles turned white, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. No, this wasn't ordinary teenage sulking. This was fear. Minutes passed like hours. The older man leaned in closer to the girl, speaking in a low, harsh tone that Michael couldn't hear, but the girl's reaction told the story. She flinched with every word, her eyes fixed downward, unable to meet his gaze. Michael gripped his coffee cup, feeling anger bubbling inside him. He knew that if he stayed silent and walked out of that diner tonight, he would never forgive himself. He looked at Emma, who was now busy drawing doodles on her napkin, blissfully unaware of the tension in the room. For her sake, for the sake of the girl across the diner, he needed to act carefully. The last thing he wanted was to put Emma in danger, but he also couldn't ignore the plea in that teenager's eyes. He was torn between protecting his daughter and saving another man's daughter from whatever nightmare she was living. Then fate gave him an opening. The older man stood up suddenly, muttering something about the restroom, and walked away from the table, leaving the girl alone. Her posture instantly shifted, her shoulders dropped, her eyes darted again to the door, then to the people around her, as though searching desperately for someone she could trust. Michael's heart pounded. This was his moment. He rose slowly from his seat, glanced at Emma, and told her softly, "Stay right here, sweetheart. I'll be back in a second." She nodded, still lost in her little drawings, unaware that her father was about to step into someone else's storm. Michael walked past the girl's booth casually, pretending to stretch as if on his way to the counter. As he passed, he leaned down just enough so only she could hear him. In a calm, low voice, he asked, "Do you need help?" For a second, the girl froze, staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. Her lips parted but no words came out. Instead, tears welled up, trembling at the edges of her lashes. She gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, but to Michael it was louder than any scream. His chest tightened. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her story, but he knew one thing: this girl was in danger, and she needed someone to care. Michael's mind raced with possibilities. Who was that man? Was he her father? A stranger? Something far darker? He couldn't jump to conclusions, but he also couldn't ignore the silent plea he had just witnessed. He whispered quickly, "Stay calm. Don't move yet. I'll help you." She gripped the edge of the table, her whole body trembling like she was barely holding herself together. For the first time that night, she looked directly into his eyes, and what he saw there shattered him: fear, desperation, and a tiny flicker of hope, like she couldn't believe someone had finally noticed. That look alone gave Michael the strength he needed. Whatever risk it carried, he couldn't walk away now. This wasn't about being a hero. It was about doing the right thing, because no one else seemed to see what he saw. He walked back to his booth, forcing himself to appear calm, though his heart hammered inside his chest. Emma looked up at him with a curious smile, asking if they could order pie for dessert. Michael nodded absent-mindedly, his thoughts consumed by the girl. He knew the man would be back any second, and once he returned, things would become more complicated. But Michael also knew something else: if that girl had the courage to nod when he asked if she needed help, then he had to find the courage to stand by her. The diner suddenly felt smaller, the ticking clock on the wall louder, every second stretching thin. He glanced toward the hallway where the man had disappeared, then back at the girl, who was now biting her lips so hard it bled. She was holding on, waiting for him to act. In that moment, Michael realized his life had changed. He hadn't expected this evening to be anything more than pancakes with his daughter, but destiny had placed him here, at this exact time, for a reason. He was a single dad, yes, but more importantly, he was a father, someone who understood what it meant to protect a child, even if she wasn't his own. And as he sat back down, his mind sharpened into a single truth: when that man returned, Michael had to be ready. Because tonight, in a small-town diner in Texas, a silent battle for one girl's freedom had just begun. Michael barely had time to breathe before the restroom door creaked open and the older man walked back toward the booth. His heavy boots struck the diner floor with a thud that made the girl flinch before he even sat down. Michael's pulse spiked. He glanced at Emma, who was still quietly doodling, then at the girl who now looked more fragile than ever. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. The man's presence suffocated her, and if he left with her, she might never get another chance to be free. Michael rose to his feet, steady but cautious, his mind racing with what he had to do next. He walked over slowly, giving the impression of friendliness, though his jaw was clenched tight. "Hey, I thought I recognized you," Michael said casually to the girl, pretending they were acquaintances. She looked startled for a moment, then quickly caught on, nodding faintly. The older man's eyes narrowed, scanning Michael with suspicion. "Do you know him?" he demanded harshly. The girl hesitated, her lips trembling, then whispered, "Why yes, he's a friend of my family." Michael gave her a reassuring look, silently telling her to hold on. He leaned down and added quietly, "Come with me. Act natural." The girl rose shakily, grabbing her worn backpack from the seat. The man stood abruptly, his face flushing red with anger. "Where do you think you're going?" he barked, stepping closer. The diner grew silent as every customer turned to watch. Michael moved instinctively, placing himself between the man and the girl. His voice was firm, calm but unyielding, "She's coming with me." The man's eyes burned with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about. She's mine." Michael's stomach twisted at those words. His instincts screamed that this wasn't a father protecting his child, this was something darker, something dangerous. He could feel the girl trembling behind him, clutching the back of his jacket as though her life depended on it. The tension in the diner thickened. Michael's heart hammered in his chest, but his voice never wavered. "You don't own her," he said firmly. "She's not going with you tonight." The man sneered, stepping closer, his fists tightening as if ready to strike. Before things could escalate further, the diner manager, an older woman with a sharp eye, picked up the phone and dialed the police, whispering urgently. Michael caught her glance and gave a subtle nod of thanks. The man noticed and exploded, slamming his palm onto the table. "You have no idea what you're doing." "She's mine," he roared again. The entire diner froze in fear, but Michael stood tall, shielding the girl behind him with every ounce of strength he had. Emma, who had been quietly drawing, looked up at the commotion. Her wide eyes filled with confusion and fear, but Michael signaled her to stay calm. He didn't want her to see him afraid. The man lunged forward, and for a moment Michael thought a fight was inevitable. But the girl's sobs broke through the tension. "Please, don't let him take me," she cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. That single cry changed everything. The diner erupted with murmurs, other patrons pulling out their phones, some stepping closer in support. The man's face twisted with fury, but his power over the girl had shattered in that moment. She had spoken, and the truth was undeniable. Just then, red and blue lights flashed through the diner windows. The police had arrived faster than anyone expected. The man stiffened, his confidence wavering as two officers burst through the doors. Michael held his ground, keeping the girl close. "That's him," Michael said firmly, pointing at the older man. The girl nodded through her tears, confirming it with broken words. The officers immediately restrained the man, who shouted profanities and tried to resist, but his struggle was pointless. He was shoved against the counter, handcuffed, and read his rights while the entire diner watched. Relief washed over Michael, but he didn't let go of the girl's hand until she felt safe enough to breathe again. The officers gently asked the girl her name, and through trembling lips she whispered, "Sophie." It was the first time Michael had heard her voice clearly. Sophie clung to him, terrified the man might somehow come back, but Michael reassured her softly. "You're safe now. He's not going to hurt you anymore." She collapsed into his chest, sobbing uncontrollably, and Michael held her the way he held Emma when she had nightmares, with steady arms and a promise of safety. Emma walked over quietly, her innocent eyes filled with tears as she asked, "Daddy, is she okay?" Michael kissed her forehead and whispered, "She will be now." Sophie looked at Emma and gave a small, broken smile. The diner slowly returned to life, customers murmuring about what they had just witnessed. Some offered comforting words to Sophie, while others thanked Michael for stepping in when no one else had. Michael didn't feel like a hero. He felt like any father would in his place, he simply couldn't stand by and let a child suffer. The officers assured him that Sophie would be taken to a safe place and connected with social services, but Sophie refused to let go of his hand. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered. Michael's heart broke. He promised her he would stay until she felt safe. He sat with her, Emma by his side, until the chaos settled and the night grew quiet again. As the police escorted the man away in their cruiser, Sophie finally allowed herself to breathe. She wiped her tears, though her face was still pale and tired. She looked at Michael with eyes full of gratitude and whispered, "Thank you. No one ever noticed before, no one ever cared." Michael swallowed hard, fighting back tears of his own. "You deserve to be noticed," he said gently. "You deserve to be free." Emma hugged Sophie tightly, her little arms offering the kind of comfort only a child could give. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sophie smiled, though faintly, knowing she wasn't invisible anymore. When the night finally ended, and Sophie was safely in the care of the officers, Michael carried Emma out of the diner, his heart heavy but proud. He looked up at the Texas sky, the stars scattered across the darkness, and whispered a silent prayer of thanks. He hadn't planned to be anyone's savior that night, but life had given him a chance to make a difference, and he had taken it. As Emma clung to his shoulder, she whispered softly, "Daddy, you're her hero." Michael kissed her hair and replied, "No, sweetheart. Tonight, we were both her heroes." And with that, he walked into the night, knowing the memory of Sophie's trembling smile would stay with him forever.